Greetings! In my recent videos, I explained a lot about why you shouldn't buy Bitcoin at its peak and where and when you should actually be buying. Since the last videos, my students and I have entered into altcoins. Now I'll show you which ones, where, for what reasons, and what I'm expecting next. I've also drawn your attention many times to the fact that trading volumes have been low lately. In order for the all-time high to be broken and for us to see a vertical surge in Bitcoin, there needs to be a spike in trading volumes. I also showed you how, right here, the maximum was broken, there was a surge in volume, then it dropped and the price corrected. But notice, volumes are still low here, and the all-time high was broken on these low volumes. This hasn't happened before. Previously, when volumes were low, we only saw corrections, trend reversals, and some significant volatility from the highs during times of reduced volume. Now the situation is a bit different. Apparently because when the price starts to fall, there is a limit buyer here who defends the levels and immediately buys back in a V-shaped manner. Apparently because of this, the market can grow little by little, gradually reaching an all-time high without volume. But if you buy Bitcoin at the high right now, what are you risking? You're risking that there will be a surge in volume not at the high but during a decline, that a flash crash will start a sharp sudden drop, you'll be left in the market, having bought in at the high. What are you risking this for? Just to see this kind of small gradual upward movement? You might think it will always be like this, that the market will always go up now, that Bitcoin will always be bought from now on. After all, institutions have entered the market, and Bitcoin is a limited asset it supposedly can be printed, and there will only ever be 21 million coins. The exact same rhetoric, the exact same thoughts were going through people's minds back in 2017. I had just entered the market at that time myself and encountered these same kinds of thoughts. Back then, by the way, Bitcoin was growing even more actively than it is now, and any drops were bought up in a V-shaped recovery just as quickly. Here's a drop, it gets bought up, another drop, it gets bought up, and I remember how it grew from just a few thousand to $7,000. At that point, I already believed it would keep growing forever and that any dips would be bought up quickly, which to be fair had been the case recently. Then all of a sudden it shot up to $20,000 on massive trading volumes. I didn't sell anything back then, and to my surprise, a year later I realized that no, Bitcoin actually isn't going to keep growing forever. There are moments like this when it drops by 80%, and since 2017 that wasn't the only time Bitcoin crashed hard. In 2019 to 20 during COVID it dropped by 70%, and in 2021 to 2022 by 80%. So I want to draw your attention to the fact that bear markets like this will happen no matter what. The more convinced you are right now that Bitcoin will always go up, the harder and more seriously it will come back to bite you. I recommend that everyone create an account on the top exchange, BingX, and here's why. First of all, it has the lowest trading fees on the market, period. And just from that alone, you can save a significant amount of money every month. The higher your trading volume, the more you'll save. Secondly, if you register using the link below, you'll get up to 30 USDT as a welcome bonus without making a deposit. There's a separate bonus of up to 500 for making a deposit, another up to 500 for trading volume, but even without the deposit you get 30. Here's what I recommend everyone do: create an account using the link below, get a bonus of up to 30 USDT, check out the exchange and see how much you could save on fees, and then if you want, start trading later. But everyone should create an account. I recommend getting a bonus on the top exchange, BingX, the link is below. Sign up. The more you do this, the more significant and serious the impact will be for you. The only thing I can say right now is that these V-shaped drops with instant buybacks have become a bit more drawn out. In other words, it's exactly the same as what happened here in 2017 V-shaped buybacks after drops. But back then, they happened quickly and sharply, whereas now it's a bit slower. See how it's stretched out a little? So, roughly speaking, more capital has come in here, which is trading, let's say, on larger timeframes. Let's open the weekly chart and see what we find. Yes, it's the same as in 2017. Here are those sharp drops that get bought up quickly. At some point this chart will likely repeat its previous movement. Eventually, record volumes should come in and pump it up vertically. But if that happens, you remember this chart, right? What should you do? You need to exit, and it's absolutely necessary to do so. But in general, buying at the highs right now is risky, because if big volumes don't come in, it could deflate at some point, one way or another. So what should you buy in that case? You don't want to stay out of the market and miss this rally, right? Some people even write in the comments that they're sitting out of the market and missing these rallies. No, my team and I, along with my students, have moved into altcoins now. And take a look at this chart. I've shown it to you more than once as well. This is the ratio of the capitalization of altcoins to the capitalization of Bitcoin. Roughly speaking, it shows how strong altcoins are compared to Bitcoin. And if this chart is rising vertically like this, that's what's called an alt season, when more or less all altcoins suddenly shoot up and multiply in value. And this is exactly what the market has been waiting for a long time in alt season, when altcoins will finally take off. All this time they've just been hitting new lows over and over again. A long time ago I showed you this zone here, which is highlighted in red. Look, the price has come here and it's forming something like a double bottom. What is this red zone? I defined it based on previous, let's say, cycles in quotes, by measuring from the 1000-day moving average on the daily chart from its peak in the previous cycle to the lowest price of the drop, which turned out to be 60%. I looked at where the peak was in this quote-unquote cycle. From the peak I subtracted 60%, and that gave me approximately this range. A long time ago I marked out this zone as a potentially possible area for buying, where the bottom might be. I was actually looking for the bottom somewhere around here as well. Nevertheless, I had already marked out this range. I was already thinking that the price wouldn't reach there either. Right here I bet on a possible alt season, but no, it still crashed. And yes, it did come into this range. Look at what's happening. There's a breakout from the downtrend. Next, the price, so in this case the chart tests the upper boundary of the previous downtrend. So it's kind of a mirror level, roughly speaking. Here it forms a double bottom with a bounce. If you look at the volumes, they're increasing here. The question is, what kind of volumes are these? These are the volumes from all the tickers that are mixed in here, and one way or another, the volumes here are increasing at the bottom, where a potential double bottom is forming, where there's a very clear strong breakout from the downtrend, which is clearly visible from the rounding of this trend. The short moving averages have already been broken, and there's confident growth with bullish engulfing patterns. The price is about to shoot up to around here. This will potentially be a double bottom. It might draw a small correction, maybe another little handle, like a cup with a handle, and then it will rise. And this won't even be an alt season. Alt season is a vertical takeoff up there, closer to the maximum of this chart. That's what alt season is. So this is just a bounce off the bottom. If someone is waiting for alt season, they might be expecting a move like that stick further up. But even on this bounce from the bottom, you can make huge money right now on alts that are basically take them. You can go wrong. And I'll show examples now of how this happened in the past, what we can expect now, and where the good entry points are. Here, for example, from the past, yes, from the recent past, look, there's a spike in volume, a double bottom, a breakout from the bottom, and the price shoots up by several dozen percent. Yes, in this case it's 20% from the potential entry point. And from the very bottom, it's 30 or even 40%. This means that overall, more or less all alts against Bitcoin at this moment are shooting up by several dozen percent. And what does that mean? It means that if Bitcoin is standing still and not growing, alts go up by 20 or 30%. If Bitcoin drops by 20 or 30%, then alts stay put and don't fall. If Bitcoin grows by 30%, then all the alts will go up by 50 or 60%. You get what I mean, right? So this is the ratio against Bitcoin, and here is the bottom. There's a really good potential for a bounce from the bottom here. And let's take a look at what's happening with altcoins in particular. This particular one was definitely my absolute favorite of all the options. And I personally got into this coin. It's NEO. NEO isn't traded everywhere, but I entered on a spot exchange where it's available. But it's on Binance, it's on OKX. By the way, it's also on BingX, including on Spot. And look at what's happening here. Here I've opened the price chart against the dollar, double bottom, rising lows. And here, by the way, this red zone was also marked by me a long time ago, ages ago, as a potential bottom where the price could come, which I probably marked somewhere around here. We didn't quite reach it, but still, yes, we touched the upper boundary somewhere. From there, the lows started rising. The downtrend was broken. And at that moment, look, there was something like an ascending triangle here. The price broke out of it and immediately consolidated above. I bought at 5.9. That is, I bought right here. As soon as the price broke out from here, I immediately bought at 5.9. Yes, it shot up a bit, then pulled back. So there hasn't been a vertical breakout here yet. Why? Well, because the coin is weak. But the fact that it's forming a bottom is obvious. Yes, here it is a double bottom. According to all sorts of technical analysis principles, the actual entry point is right here, at the double bottom, when the price breaks out of this pattern, with a potential for about this kind of rally. So I entered quite early. I bought in just on the trend reversal and the breakout from this local triangle. And in general, the breakout from the local triangle played out, right? The triangle is small, so the breakout from here also gives only a small impulse, and that's what happened. But considering the overall market situation, I'm expecting a further breakout. Yes, there's a slight correction right now. Yes, it's starting to bend down. That's because Bitcoin is also starting to bend down. See, Bitcoin touched this trend line. If you draw it from the previous highs, and as soon as it hit the trend line, people started selling. There's no significant volume. It didn't shoot up vertically, even though it set a new all-time high. This is a very serious signal for a possible decline. But even if there is a decline here, most likely it will be minor. Considering how quickly and sharply Bitcoin gets bought up in a V-shape during dips, and how it keeps growing little by little to new all-time highs even without much volume. So I'm not expecting any kind of bear market here or a sharp massive drop. There might be a small drop which will get bought up again in a V-shape just like in previous moves, and at the same time altcoins against Bitcoin are growing well. So even if Bitcoin falls, most likely altcoins won't fall as much or might not fall at all. When the market bounces back, altcoins will surge even more. And let me just show you as an example what happened right here. This was at the end of November to the beginning of December 24 when this chart shot up, when it was rising. Let's open something like, well, say Bitcoin Cash, just as a random example. This is a chart against Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Cash was going down, down, down. And then at the end of November to the beginning of December bump, a sudden spike out of nowhere, plus 32%. Let's take a look at the Bitcoin Cash to dollar chart. Here it is. End of November to beginning of December, Bitcoin Cash was just flat, volatility was within a range, and then bam, against the dollar, it almost doubled just because this chart gave a little spike like that. And something similar could very well happen here. And in general, let's think now from the perspective of market strength. Well, is it there or not? Bitcoin as a whole broke its all-time high on low volumes, which is very risky, but nevertheless there is something, even if just a little, in favor of some kind of sluggish, but still growth continuing. Let's move on. Ethereum was the weakest coin. It formed the bottom and broke out of it. I made money on it here. Plus, there was some volatility that formed here, but nevertheless, the breakout from the volatility was upwards, key levels were confidently broken, and it's no longer the weakest coin. There is a buyer here. The bottom was formed and it rebounded sharply from the bottom. Everything is great, all good, so this chart looks quite attractive. Binance coin is actually near its highs, it's being squeezed upwards. In other words, it hasn't even pulled back. The market, judging by the first coins I just showed you, looks quite strong. ADA already formed the bottom back in 2023 and bounced sharply. Yes, there were significant drops, but the lows are still rising, and with these higher lows, there were several upward impulses. After the last one, yes, there was a 60% drop, but just now, right before our eyes, we see the same pattern as on that altcoin to Bitcoin chart. We see an ascending triangle, a breakout upwards, and just a takeoff. In this context, there's the ascending triangle, the breakout upwards, and the take of this is for ADA. There has already been a take of here, yes, a small one, yes, up to the upper edge of this flag right here. But still, the flag itself is a bullish pattern and should be traded for breakout upwards. And, well, maybe something like that will happen a bit later. Some kind of correction might still form here, with an entry point for those who haven't managed to get in yet. Obviously, you shouldn't buy ADA here at the highs. There was a spike here, and after the spike, some correction down to the level. From that level, there could be a bounce, and that's where we can enter. If you haven't entered NEO yet, let's say it corrects down to here, forms a higher low here, draws 3 mirror T's at this level, you can buy in, why not? Somewhere around 5 or 7, for example, and it could bounce from there. So yes, because Bitcoin has just formed this kind of bearish pattern, altcoins might correct as well, might correct along with it, but in the midterm, this will be a good entry point into alts if you haven't done so yet. At times, when the market doesn't show any strength, situations like this shouldn't occur. Look, just an altcoin that absolutely nobody needs, it just kept falling. Well, there were a few instances of sharp rebounds, but they deflated instantly, and then it hits a new low vertically and shoots up 10x from that bottom. There shouldn't be such cases if the market is weak. So this is what a weak market looks like. Just a sluggish fading of a coin that nobody needs. It keeps falling, hitting new lows. The rare rebounds deflate instantly. But this is already some groundwork for a trend reversal in altcoins as well. By the way, we have another coin that's hugging the bottom and barely growing, hasn't even spiked at this point. That's OMZGO. If you want, you can throw a tiny part of your balance into it. Why not, right? Just 3-5%. If it also shoots up by 10x, your 5% will turn into plus 50% of your current balance. But if it suddenly goes to 0, well, you'll just lose 2 or 3% of your balance. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. There's at least some potential there. And once again, I bought NEO with my students. Why? Because here we have a good bottom pattern, rising lows, a breakout from the downtrend, a bullish setup at the moment, and an upward breakout. It's the same thing that happened with something like ADA, which took off because ADA is strong and NEO is weak. Do you see the difference in the impulse after the growth? But the potential here is greater than with that same ADA, simply because this coin is at the bottom. And take note, okay? It would seem that NEO is also an old coin, nobody needs it. Here it is, updating its bottom. I just showed you a precedent of a coin nobody needed, which grew tenfold from the bottom. And NEO, unlike that coin in the past, has had precedents where it crashes sharply, forms a bottom, and then shoots up, bounces back. And this has nothing to do with any kind of altcoin seasons. It's just a weak coin bouncing off the bottom. Plus 145%, plus 130, up to here. If you add it all up, that's 260%. And here, some bottom shot up by 150%. So at the very least, there is rebound potential. And right now, I'm not even talking about a potential altcoin season, but about the fact that this trend is changing and there could be some kind of spike here. And this spike could be anywhere from 50 to 100, maybe even 150% profit, which you need to catch. And that's where the potential lies. I don't see any potential in buying Bitcoin at its highs. Well, imagine you bought Bitcoin at $20,000 in 2017. And then what? Sure, you had to wait it out for a few years. It eventually did hit a new all-time high. You did make a profit in the end, but what would you have done in 2018, 2019 and 2020 before the rally started? You would have spent 3 years in the red if you had waited a bit and bought Bitcoin, for example, not at the peak in 2017, but after it pulled back in 2018, not at 20, maybe not at the very bottom, but at least somewhere around 7. That would already be a 2x or even 2.5x increase to your balance. By the time those who bought at the peak got their money back, you would have already made a profit. So buying at the peak is not the best decision. It's better to buy on pullbacks. Bitcoin might pull back, or it might not, or it could just stay flat for quite a while. But what really provides entry points are altcoins that have already pulled back significantly, pulled back hard. Take Neo, for example, which I bought. This is how it looks against Bitcoin. Take a look. There have already been instances where it was priced about the same as it is. Now, what did it do after that? The gains were insane percentages. I won't even bother showing them to you. It did show them, but don't focus on those. Those are crazy percentages. That usually doesn't happen. But the very fact is, here's the bottom, and some kind of rebound is possible here. Moreover, just look at what exactly happened when Neo approached its all-time historical low. I've also told you how breaking an all-time low works. If a coin rises up to its all-time low and any slight drop sends it down, it breaks through and just goes minus 50, minus 60% to the next low. And what happened here is the all-time low. I've marked it right here with a level. The coin pressed up against it, pressed. And with any slight move, yes, there was a sharp drop. To where? Notice minus 50%. Right here, yes, minus 50%. And this is roughly the area of the next day. As soon as the all-time low is broken, minus 50%, a new bottom potentially forms here. And look, the downtrend was broken. We pressed up against this trend from the other side, kind of like a mirror level. Yes, the sell-off continued along the moving averages, but now we've approached the moving averages again. Here, you can already see the trend rounding off, and there's potential for a breakout into some kind of wedge. If this level is broken, there's a move above the moving averages, a breakout from the wedge upwards, at least to the next level, just a simple 50% gain on a bounce from the bottom. Not to mention any alt seasons or anything else at all, just a bounce from the bottom. Buy at the bottom, not at the top. That's my advice to you. Look,